This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
When you want to have fun and have scratchers to scratch, there's a playful way you can do just that. Scratch with the key or acrylic nail. Scratch with the quill from a porcupine tail. Use a belt buckle from your friend Lamar. Or scratch with your pick while you play guitar. You can scratch in a bunch of different playful ways. Scratchers from the California Lottery. A little play can make your day. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Steve Goldberg, basketball fan and co-host of the Mostly Horror podcast. And joining him is his co-host, Sean Parker. We're doing things a little bit differently. We're talking to both of them about both of their favorite movies in 2 different episodes, but you're getting 2 interviews. I don't know how to explain this properly. Steve and Sean will be on each other's respective episodes, so we're splitting up their interviews a little bit. Sorry. Did not know how to explain things all of a sudden.
That made complete sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much. But we'll be starting the 2-part interview talking about the podcast and all that good stuff. So welcome to the show, Sean and Steve.
Thanks for having us.
Stoked to be here. Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting us.
We're really excited to chat with you, especially both of your 2 picks, because I have a lot of thoughts about those. But before we do get into any of that, let's start with the now. Don't be nervous. Let's start with the now. What can you tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast and how it came to be?
Yeah. Do you want me to start, Sean? All right.
Steve, you go.
So Sean and I are both from Michigan. We live in New York City currently. We moved here a couple years ago, and while we were in Michigan during quarantine, funny enough, not to bury the lead, but we were, like a lot of people, trying to figure out what we wanted to do, and we're like, let's start a podcast. Sean and I are both horror fans, and we have different perspectives looking at the genre, and so we started recording something that essentially looked like My Favorite Murder, where we would like talk about movies and both bring a film that we wanted to talk about and then rate them and pick one, or I don't know. It was a weird concept. We recorded like 3 of them and then kind of scrapped it. It wasn't what we wanted. And then I think we paused a little bit, and I've always been a big fan of hot ones and kind of just interview format in general, as well as this other. I'm like you said, basketball fan. I work for a basketball team. I'm a fan of this basketball podcast that's called The Old Man and the Three. It's basically a retired basketball player interviewing sports people, and it's just I love the format and what you can bring out of the guest. And so we decided that we wanted to start a interview-based horror podcast. The kind of twist to this, Sean and I are both very aware that we're two cis straight white dudes, and realistically there's so many podcasts where just two cis straight white dudes talk about horror films for an hour plus, and no one wants to hear that shit, and I kind of agree. And so the podcast is very much not about us. Like, we want to bring people in and let them know that horror is more than just kind of like a conversation we were having off the air, so to speak, but horror is more than just spooky films like The Exorcist or The Ring or whatever. And so that's why we put the mostly in front of it. We think a lot of things can be horror, and as long as someone has that justification or that reason why they think it's a horror film, we agree. And then the other aspect is we want to bring people in, whether it's filmmakers or writers or actors or even people that are in other professions that are fans of the genre. We want to bring them in and talk to them about their intros to the genre and what they love about the genre, and also their careers as a whole. We've had people from Lemony Snicket to the creator of, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, to Radio Silence, to, like all over the spectrum. We just love having those conversations. So that was pretty long-winded, Sean. I don't know if
it was a very elegant way of saying what I think in a more simple whatever that we did was we were like, we like a lot of spooky stuff and we like a lot of cool things. We just want an excuse to meet, some of these creatives that we really admire, make some friends, and talk about the genre. And really kind of figure out where those lines are. I've had so many conversations where people are like, but is it really a horror movie? And most of the time I say, yes, we claim it. So
yeah, it's mostly.
Yep, mostly
it's always
horror.
funny because with our podcast, it's, what movie scared you. And so most of them, or scarred you as a kid, most of them are horror, but then we have people come in, they're like, I'm sorry, this isn't horror. And they're like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're talking about a moment that terrified you, whether it was in an abortion document like series, or whether it was in like what depends on whatever it is. What is it that gets you? And so I always, whenever people come on and they're like, I don't know if you guys consider Predator horror, I'm like, it's horror, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So I get that 100%.
Yeah. We've had defense for like
go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
I was just gonna say we had defense for like Never-Ending Story being horror. If you wanna, you know what I mean. Like 100%. Those things that really freaked you out, especially when you were little. That's something we explore a bit on our show, not to the extent that you guys are. But yeah, sorry, Steve.
I was just gonna say I was listening to your guys' episode with Noah Sagan. Is that his name? Who did Blood Relatives, and he brought Stand By Me, and I was like, our films are not going to be nearly as eloquent and like as he's pulling all these like thematic things from his like, fuck, dude, I talk about it's literally a movie that scared me. So, but no, I love that, right? Like, it's so the ethos of your guys' show and what you're allowing people to bring on is very similar to ours and kind of our viewpoint as well. So I think we all agree on that, which is great. I think all horror fans should really be open to, like, if you say it's horror, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Has there like been any movies that people have brought onto the podcast that have like broadened your view of horror, or kind of like opened your eyes? Do you have any examples of that at all?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I feel like absolutely yes, but in this moment I'm not thinking of any. Usually because I'm just excited that they brought something different to the table where I'm like, yes, absolutely. It's usually me agreeing. Specifically, I remember when we had Gory Corey on, that was an episode where we talked a lot about like kids movies that that should be considered horror. So like there's this weird movie from the 90s called Pet Shop that we talked about, and Never-Ending Story, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I can't. Yeah.
I'll also say, like, we also find ourselves reaffirming it a lot. So at the end of our episodes, we ask our guests for what we call mostly horror recs. So basically they say a horror film and then a non-horror film that they want to recommend to listeners. And a lot of people, for for their mostly quote unquote or non-horror film, we've had a lot of annihilations, and they're like, well, I feel like this is probably kind of horror, and Sean and I are both like, yes, it's fucking horror. Like, it's horror. Just like reaffirm that for you. Like, yes. So we find ourselves doing that a lot, where we're like, don't like tiptoe around it. Like, if you think something's horror, like, we will be behind you saying that it is.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I think that's like the biggest contention point in when we talk about horror, because horror is such an expressive genre. You can attach it to anything and make it something else, but that does not necessarily mean that it loses its horror flair. And so I think when people talk about Annihilation or Predator, or I'm trying to think of some of the other movies that came on, it's like, well, it's not really horror. Jaws happens to a lot where it's like not really horror.
Yeah.
And it's because
Jurassic
you're taking
Park.
Jurassic Park. Yeah, that movie in particular, we had a discussion about that, because I'm like, listen, it doesn't matter if this is this and this, if it's combined sci-fi and horror, adventure and horror, or whatever the case may be, horror can encompass all of that. And that's what I love about the genre so much.
Yeah,
absolutely. Horror is like a mood. It's a genre, but it's a mood. It's an aesthetic. It's a direction, in my opinion. Like, it can be so many different things. And I think some of the best horror moments are in movies that even I would not like. I wouldn't say that Temple of Doom in its entirety is a horror movie, but the Kali Ma scene is 100% a horror scene. Plenty of
absolutely.
I wouldn't consider Harry Potter a horror franchise, but there are absolutely plenty of horror elements littered throughout it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So.
and J.K. Rowling is, essentially a horror villain. So I think the other thing is, I wish you had a visual podcast, because that was a great reaction.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, another example of that, like one of my favorite films is Yorgos Lanthimos' The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Very much like really not a horror film, but like I would call it a horror film. It makes me feel like garbage, and like it makes me deeply uncomfortable, and like that's what I want from every horror film. So like. Yeah, it's. I feel like all of our favorite films are like littered with horror aspects, and that's why the mostly horror. Just like we said that, and we were like, that's fucking it. That's the name. It feels so good, and like we'll never vary from that.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, okay. Before, I know we're going to talk more about like childhood stuff next time, but I do want to know right now, what is the last movie that scared both of you, like really got to you?
Mine's not out yet, so we can talk about it a little bit, I guess. And I'm also trying to.
Is it Talk to Me?
It's fucking Talk to Me. It scared the living shit out of me.
Everyone is going to be talking about that fucking movie.
Yeah,
and
we have.
That is going to be one of those movies that comes up on the podcast. So we have that come up. It's like, when's the last movie? And a lot of times it's Hereditary, or it's like there are these movies that keep coming up, and I have a feeling Talk to Me is going to be that movie in like a year's time.
Yeah, that movie fucked my head up though when I watched it. Jesus.
So like Sean hasn't seen it, which is like the saddest thing. I'm really hoping we can get a screener soon. But like that movie had me shaking a bit, and I haven't been shaking in a film in a long time. But I will mention because you said Hereditary, and I think that's probably like, we'll talk about intros to horror and like when we were kids, but Hereditary is the film that like turned the key for me. Like in 2018, and we can kind of talk about this when I talk about my pick, but I was never a huge horror kid growing up, but we'll get to that at another time. But in 2018, Hereditary comes out, and I'm a big film guy. It looks like a artsy fartsy, indie flick, and I'm like, hell yeah, love A24. You can't see my shorts, but I'm wearing them right now. And it's just
God, you have the A24 shorts.
I do. I also have I literally support them, so I have my Killing of a Sacred Deer mug literally sitting right here.
Oh my God, you are a shill. So, I respect it.
Anyways,
I have one of their scents dangling in my car right now. The noir scent.
I didn't even know they do that.
All around.
Yeah, they do. Well, the thing is, they have candles, and I was like, I really want to get a candle, but I ain't spending that kind of money on a candle if I don't know what it smells like. So I was like, let's get the car fresheners.
I didn't know that existed.
I have noir hanging in my car right now.
Wow,
that's so good.
I could take you on a tour,
but Marcel is up there.
Yes,
somewhere.
I have Marcel in the living room. Oh yeah. Anyways,
anyway,
not just shelling out for A24, but so Sean and I actually go to see this film, and I, not dissimilar to puberty, felt something change within me. I I mean, Sean, do you want to tell the story from your perspective?
No.
It's I literally the scene. I'm not whatever spoilers. The pole head scene.
Spoiling it.
Whatever. If you're listening to this and you haven't seen Hereditary, get yourself checked out.
What are you doing?
But, I literally stuck that happens and my hands went straight into the air. Like I straight up just was hands in the air. And I felt something change, and that was really my moment of horror can be anything. I know the types of horror that I like, and I found the type of horror that I love, which is Hereditary, and I still think it's my favorite horror film. But yeah, so that was my definitely the film that rocked me the most, and that was 5 years ago. So
yeah, I just want to say, as Steve's longtime friend. It was so frustrating because I've been obsessed with horror forever, and a lot of our friends are, and he just wasn't. I think he always had the spooky bug, we would talk about Tim Burton films and different things, different art and things that we liked, but in terms of getting him to sit down or join us with horror movie nights, couldn't do it. And I tried for a long time, and he just wasn't his thing. And when the trailer for Hereditary came out, seeing him excited about it was very exciting for me. And it was me and him and our buddy Cam, who is also a big horror fan, and we went and saw it. And he's not exaggerating. I was sitting next to him, and I could feel him become a horror fan during that movie. And it was
so cool.
I'm being dead serious. I think that horror fans, you guys will understand. We love this genre, and one of the most fun things about it is bringing people into the dark side and exposing them. Yeah, and this is a moment I will never forget, was Steve's beautiful transformation into a horror fan via Hereditary. So just had to throw that out there, that he's not making shit up. That's how it went down.
Yeah.
Wait, that's so sweet. I love that story. Wow. Then Sean, what about you? What is a movie that has terrified you recently?
Okay, so it's, in terms of recently, it's hard. I can point to movies that, because I get asked by friends or people, what's the scariest movies that have come out recently and stuff, and
everyone asks that same question.
When people know that you're a big horror fan, especially when you work in the industry to some degree, you get asked, and it's fun, but it's hard because fear is such it's
very hard.
It's not an objective thing. It's very subjective, and I'm pretty desensitized, like us at this point. So I don't know about the most recent, but the thing I'm going to tell you is, I think to this day, the thing that had the biggest impact on me was Marble Hornets, which isn't exactly a horror movie, but I'm sure you guys are familiar with. Yeah, Marble Hornets, when it was still season 1, when there were only the 23 or 26 episodes.
Before Slender Man was cool.
Yeah, before Slender Man was games or really even memes, I thought it was real. I was in high school, and I'm not joking. I'd been a horror fan for years at that point, was desensitized, and I slept with the lights on for 3 nights in a row. Wow. It was just pure paranoia injected into my veins. It fucked with me too
when I watched it too, because I was like, nope, I can't do it. It's real. It's coming for me. Because it was right, again, like you said, it was right when found footage was right when YouTube found footage stuff was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those people, people were uploading things and being like, it's real. And you were like, maybe it is.
Yep.
And it was, ugh.
I completely bought it. I was leaning towards Alien at the time, and I got Alien on the brain. That's a whole episode in itself. And yeah, man, it was just pure paranoia straight into my system, and I thought it was real, and nothing has ever hit me that hard since. And I wish I could show it to people today, but you can't, because everybody knows what Slender Man is. So you can't have the same experience that the people that were watching at that time had. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that I missed, because I'm a little older, and so I knew, I was aware of it. I was aware of Slender Man, but I remember sitting down and watching one of the videos and going, I don't get it, and then just moving on. I was not in that kind of mindset.
You should watch them now that I've converted you to found footage, because you didn't like it until recently, and now you might because of me.
I totally get that. It's even in its prime, even when Slender Man wasn't this icon, and we didn't have a real life case behind it that kind of tainted that whole thing, obviously.
Yeah.
It it's not something that is for everybody. It was just one of those. It was like it had a target audience. It found them at the right time, and if you happen to be a part of that audience and catch it at the right time, then I think it's for me it is one of the most enjoyable and like exciting watches that I've had. Still,
it's also
and scared the hell out of me.
It's also like what, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like with so much found footage, it's so contextual. Like very similar to like Blair Witch and even the film that we were going to talk about today. Like I feel like the way that you watch it and when you watch it and how old you are when you watch, like all of those things are so important. I mean that's kind of horror in general, but specifically with found footage, like it's so contextual. So like you may have just missed it, which sucks. You know what I mean? Like it's like, well, you know, it won't affect me ever that same way.
Well, we've had a couple people in that have talked about creepypastas and talked about that sort of like online community that sort of evolved around them, and it just I miss that thing because I was like out of college at that point because I'm 42, so like I missed a whole bunch of that type of. That I think if I was like of the right age, I would have been obsessed with it. If I had come to age when there was the internet and there was YouTube and there was all that kind of shit, like I would have been deeply into those communities for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Like, I want to.
We're all going to the alls. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, my bad. You go ahead. It's your show.
Marble, like when I think of like Marble Hornets, I think of We're All Going to the World's Fair. Like that was very much my vibe. That's like very much like that era. But anyway, that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
I'm just curious. You're making me think of it now, talking about creepypastas. Are you guys familiar with the back rooms at all? Because that might... Yeah, I think that the back rooms is in that realm, and if I'm going to put that as my honorable mention to your question about the scariest thing recently. I think there's a lot of potential there to do something exciting with that. It's very like they're freaky videos and it's goofy, but I don't know. Yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
So I'm curious, how long have you guys known each other?
High school? How long, Sean?
Yeah, so
you can pinpoint it more than I can.
We've known of each other since about high school. We had a lot of mutual friends. This sounds weird, but we had a lot of mutual friends, but then we didn't really interact. But I know on both of our ends, we were told by other people, like, you should really hang out with Steve and you should really hang out with Sean. And then it kind of, we like tried to make like projects together, like a couple different things. And
we like wrote some stuff together. And this is like a decade plus now. So
yeah. So high school is my answer.
But yeah, and then we have we had some mutual friends, and then just became close shortly after high school. So we've been really good friends for about a decade, and obviously have very similar interests.
Yeah.
Huh. Weird.
Yep.
Wait, and then Sean, you're also an illustrator, right? You do like spooky illustrations.
Yeah, it's I haven't been. I'm not the best at figuring out that part of my life in a professional setting yet. I don't have like as much of a grasp on being able to do it every time I want to. I get creative block a lot, but I do illustrations online under the name like Hypocrite Ink, and I've done a couple things. I'm working on something right now that's taking way longer than it's supposed to because I'm just a mess.
Ain't that just the way?
Yeah.
But it'll be cool when it comes out. So
yeah. Once I get on top of it, it'll be good.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about all that awesome stuff, but let's dive into the movie that you brought with you today, Steve. What movie are we talking about?
The film that we are talking about is the 2009 found footage, quote-unquote, masterpiece, Quarantine.
Hell yeah. All right, so for those of you unfamiliar, Quarantine is a remake of Wreck, which we have talked about on the podcast previously. And in Quarantine, reporter Angela, played by Jennifer Carpenter, and her cameraman Scott are doing a story on night shift firefighters for a reality TV program, one of whom is played by Jay Hernandez, who is a babe. A late-night distress call takes them to an LA apartment building where the police are investigating a report of horrific screams. The TV team and emergency workers find an old woman who suddenly attacks with teeth bared. What's more, Angela and company find that the building has been sealed by CDC workers. Then the attacks really begin.
Yeah.
Is that from IMDb? What a
Sure is. Sure is. I did add the Jay. I added the Jay Hernandez as a babe thing.
Well, yes.
That
Sure.
was me editorializing. I did editorialize a little bit there.
I think that's on the back of the DVDs.
Yeah. Same joke. One of the Jay Hernandez who is a babe. Like, seriously. But it's true.
I wrote all the promotional material for this movie.
There you go. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
So take us back. How old were you when you saw this? How did you see this? Give us your horror story.
All right. Can I preface this by saying something really quick? I need to preface this whole conversation.
You preface anything you want.
I have not seen Wreck.
What?
Shunned.
So and I am very, oh my God.
Oh, Terry left. Oh my God. Terry left.
And so I need to make sure I preface this because I knew it was going to come out in one way or another.
No, good. Get that out of the way first.
Absolutely. So I haven't seen Wreck. I saw Quarantine when I was I believe it came out my freshman year of high school. It came out in October, I think, that year. So freshman year of high school. So I was 14 and I hadn't seen Wreck before then, wasn't a big horror fan. And so, and to this day, I know that it's supposed to be the inferior, remake. Obviously, like normally the remakes aren't better than the originals, but it's not, people don't really say it's on par. They say that, the ending changes, I think, is one of the differences, or that it's basically shot for shot with worse acting. And a lot of the reviews are like, people should just read subtitles, which fair. I want to watch Wreck. I just haven't gotten around to it, but I also am not going to let it spoil how I feel about Quarantine.
Absolutely.
And I still we could talk about how I feel about the film, but so I just wanted to get that out of the way. I have nothing against Wreck, and I just haven't seen it yet, and I want to, and I will. Literally, Sean and I were talking about it today, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew all of these thoughts, and anyone listening, all of these thoughts. This is like a Plato's cave or whatever the fuck it is. I'm not aware of Wreck, so all of my thoughts, okay. I'm only seeing the shadow. I'm not seeing the real image. So don't be upset with me. Yeah. Well,
okay. So before we do dig into that, I do want to say something because I do think American remakes get a bad rap of I
agree
it with horror fans. They do, and the thing is that for me, when The Ring came out. What was that? 2001, somewhere around there. I think it was 20 at the time. Was it 2001, 2000? Somewhere around in that early 2003, maybe. 2. Okay. So I was in my 20s at that time, and that was the first time that I realized that there were movies made outside of Hollywood because this was a remake of a Japanese horror movie, and that spearheaded me into a different direction as a horror fan. So while people may have problems with the remakes, may call them inferior, may say things like, go watch the subtitles, the thing that I do appreciate about American remakes is that for the right fan, it will spur them into finding more horror films. And so that's what it did with me. And it opened up this huge world of J horror and K horror and just a whole bunch of things that I never would have experienced had that movie never come to American audiences. So I just want to kind of preface that it is a remake. I don't think it's as superior as Wreck, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Can I quickly say
please.
That we defend, and especially me, defend remakes a lot on our pod. A lot of remakes are terrible, but I think it's almost like when we enter into the conversation about movie remakes, especially American remakes of foreign movies. Obviously, there's issues there. People should be able to consume content from other places, and I think that there's a white American issue there. But also in the nature of storytelling, we have always retold stories like forever, and there's different versions of every mythology. I just think it's in our nature to keep stories alive by retelling them and stuff. So I think I just want to say that people that are just against all remakes, I think that I don't agree with that, but I do understand the frustration that comes with them.
Well, I also will say on the flip side of that, a couple weeks ago, it's announced that Speak No Evil is being remade less than a year or a year after the Danish, the original Danish version comes out. And Sean and I are both not stoked on that.
Whatever. I'm gonna say. Never mind.
What?
I just don't think Speak No Evil's fine. I just don't understand why you're obsessing over it. Like, it's fine. I don't know. There's weirder shit out there. Why are we all acting like this? Whatever.
Yeah.
Watch some real
have different
fucked up
thoughts
shit, guys. Come on. Jesus Christ. Have you ever watched a fucking European splatter movie before?
Yeah.
Sorry, it was aggressive.
It was very aggressive.
Totally fair.
She has feelings.
Yes.
Sometimes cut out, that ain't shit. Sorry. Anyway, when did you first see this movie? Tell us everything about when you first saw Quarantine.
So Quarantine, I was 14. I think high school, had just started, or maybe, had been like a month. And at this point, I'm going to horror films if my friends want to, because I'm hanging out with them and seeing movies. I am not seeking them out by my own accord. And I was with my friend Brandon, and I believe our friend Gabe, and Quarantine is rated R. And so Brandon's parents, who were advocates of the genre, or at least advocates of letting their child, our good friend Brandon, see things that maybe 14-year-olds shouldn't. We're like, we'll go sit in the theater and you guys can sit in another row. Like, we're not taking you guys to the movies. And so we go into this film, and the beginning, and again, it feels so weird because I want to talk about this film as if it's like this original thing, and it's obviously not. So I'm like, they set it up so well, but they did it in the original. But like,
share how you feel. Share how you feel about it. I want to hear how you feel about it. It does not. Don't think about Rec. Think about how you experienced it and how you feel about it.
All right.
We'll save the Rec talk for later.
Sure. Yeah.
And listeners, if you judge him, I'll fight you. Be nice.
Yeah. Shut up, guys. And so I see this film. I'm going to talk from the point of view of my 14-year-old self. So I see this film. And the beginning is, it's funny. There's jokes happening. I don't really recognize things as being misogynistic because I'm 14, so I'm just a douchebag kid laughing at the, I'm gonna bang this girl jokes that are happening. And so I'm drawn into this film. I'm like, there's funny firefighters and a woman who obviously wants to be a part of the, the guy's crew, and she's a strong lead and whatever. And so they, you're waiting for them to get a call, and they finally get a call, and that's very exciting. And in my opinion, from that point, Rec is like all gas, no brake. Or not Rec, sorry. Well, I mean, Rec probably is too, but Quarantine, Freud would say something about what just happened. But Quarantine is like all gas, no brake. Like literally so chaotic from the moment that they get in. So that was one thing that I think I loved about it. But I was terrified because that movie is straight chaos. And a lot of people, I'm on Letterboxd. I obviously, watching it now, like 29 years old, I am reading through these reviews and seeing people bitch about Jennifer Carpenter. I don't agree. Like, I think that she is like doing stress and fear so well in like a very nuanced way that at 14 years old, I was feeling that. Like when she's freaking out at the end, I was freaking out. Like she is hyperventilating. I'm hyperventilating. Our friend Brandon has told the story before, saying that I cried in the theater. I don't think I cried in the theater.
He totally did.
But I definitely, no, Sean, this is not canon. But like my friend Brandon will say that because he's being a dumbass. But I am a very tall person. I'm 6'4", and this was a film where my knees were up to my chin. Like I was like, I remember being like just a ball of stress and anxiety and fear. Because shit just doesn't stop. Like there's so many times in the movie where you're like, I need to breathe, and it doesn't really let you, especially if you're like not you're not versed in the genre. You can't like take that step back and remove yourself and like digest a scene or like think about what they're saying. You're just fucking scared. And so that was just all that I was just scared. And honestly, that led into, I think that film also led into my love of found footage. I love found footage. I'm not nearly as versed as you are, and I want to be more well versed. But I love the genre because of that film and because of January of that year, Cloverfield came out. So those two films really like spurred that love. So that's my initial memory My friend Brandon tells a more compelling story, but
well, so I mean, you're right. This movie, once they get to the apartment building, it is pure chaos. It is something is happening like every single moment of this film, and it's filmed almost in a continuous long take. Like there are cuts, obviously, where they put the camera down, but in terms of like pacing, it does not let up. It just is constantly moving through the entire film. But I'm curious, were there particular moments that like just broke your brain at 14?
I think that the man falling, Fletch, the firefighter, falling about at the end of the first act is one of the most jarring things that I've ever experienced in a theater. Like that is probably number 2 underneath Charlie's head hitting the pole. I remember, because it's a quiet moment, and they basically Doppler effect his scream coming from the 4th floor all the way down, and then the splatter. And it's just like, jump scares are jump scares, but they're great when they're earned, and that's a very earned jump scare. It's not out of place in the context of the film. It's everything that you want from a jump scare, and that viscerally just shook me. I'll also say
we love a falling moment. We love a falling moment. Oh yeah. I was just thinking like back. I don't know if you guys have seen Z, and I'm not going to spoil the moment, but there is a falling moment in Z down a staircase that is just like when executed correctly, and they just come out of nowhere. You're like, what the fuck? And it's such a great moment. I love them.
Exactly. And it was just one of those things where it shook me, because you're not thinking about the situation that Fletch is still currently like dealing with the old woman upstairs, and so it like brings you back to like, you're stuck in one reality, and it brings you back to another that's happening concurrently, because of the fact that this is all one, quote unquote, all one long take for this film, or at least takes place during this one night. You were remembering that these different things are happening in the apartment complex. The other thing that I'll say really freaked me out about this film, I'll save the full explanation for our next conversation, but I, growing up, really hated foaming at the mouth. Like seeing people foaming at the mouth freaked me out, and it still kind of freaks me out. And so the people foaming at the mouth really like made me uncomfortable. I think that the special effects makeup and all of that is done really well in this film. So like, it is. I don't like old people. They freak me out as well. So like, the fact that this film, old people freak me the fuck out, dude. The fact that this film starts off with an old woman foaming at the mouth is like, cool, check all the fucking boxes for me. And then she's the one that throws the man down the stairs. So like, those were like very specific things that I can point to as being like, these definitely scared me. The other thing, I guess the third thing that I will say is, and Sean and I just talked about this, we rewatched it recently, is near the end of the film, and I'm sure you guys say spoilers for all of this stuff, but like near the end of the film. Oh,
we're a spoiler cast.
We're way past that. At the end of the film, Scott, the cameraman, literally just says, "Oh, an attic became open. I'm gonna stick my camera up there to see if anything's there," which essentially is a device of like, I'm going to put the camera in this dark area and spin it around until something scary happens. I know that now. I'm an adult. At 14 years old, I was like, fuck. What's going to happen? Just like really scared, because it's one of those moments you can't escape. I wanted to crawl out of my skin, and you're just like sitting there waiting for something to happen. And so that device, again, for a 14-year-old kid, was so successful. They did it so well.
Yeah. I can't disagree. I can't disagree with that. I will say I think Rec does a little bit better.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious what it was like watching the ending of this movie in the theater for the first time, because I saw Rec on like a really shitty Blu-ray that I think was not like a legit Blu-ray that I got shipped to me that I watched. I'm watching it on my like laptop. My face is so close to the screen, but I can't imagine seeing that moment for the first time in a movie theater. So I'm kind of curious how that ending scene kind of played out for you.
Yeah, I think so. Going back to what I was talking about with the contextuality of horror and the contextuality of found footage, when Sean and I rewatched this film recently, we watched it in daylight. when I saw this in the theater's pitch black. And this is also back in the day where they probably didn't like have exits lit up as light as they are now. Like, it was fucking dark in the theater. So in quarantine, the light is flashing. The camera's not staying on the whole time. So it's going, light, dark. And so I just, your heart is racing the whole time. You see Doug Jones's beautiful, scary face, and you're like, fuck, and it starts to beat even faster. And and then at the ending, again, that's one of those moments where they toy with giving you a moment to breathe, and then they don't. And like, I don't love the ending. I think it's kind of a cliched, like, not overdone, but like something that you've seen before. Again, viewing this as an adult. And so it was one of those things where she's been freaking out for so long, and your heart has been racing, and she's trying to escape, and then you finally have a moment to breathe where everything's quiet. You see her, and she's just trying to get to the camera, and she's dragged away. And so you get one last, one last jump scare, one last like heart palpitation. So yeah, the ending really fucked me up. I will say, viewing this from my current point of view, I really think it's so damn goofy when found footage films use the green night vision effect, because it's so, and like, again, two of my favorite found footage films, Cloverfield and Quarantine, and they both do it, and it's just goofy and doesn't exist, and it immediately now pulls me out. Like, anytime I see a film and they're like, it's dark, let's turn on night vision on our camcorder, it'll just take me out of the scene completely. But at that point, I wasn't thinking about that. So I was just thinking about her not being able to see, because Jennifer Carpenter does a great job of like fake like tapping around with her eyes huge to try to see where she is. So yeah, it was very like visceral, and I think they did a great job. And to that point, I would love for my first time when I experience Rec to like see it in a theater or see it in a good environment. Like, I need one of the repertory theaters here to bring it out in October or something, because I don't want to experience this film in a way where I'm going to be like, I didn't like it as much because of external factors. So
So I had a similar experience where I saw Quarantine first, and I saw Quarantine in theaters as well.
Yeah,
because I saw it when I was 15 in theaters with my dad, because my dad would take me to like all the big movies, and we loved found footage. Like, I loved The Blair Witch Project. I loved Cloverfield. Paranormal Activity was the next year, but like all of those movies I was super excited about. And so when I saw Quarantine, it scared the shit out of me. Like, absolutely fucking terrified me. I hadn't seen anything like that before. Like, even though I had like seen horror stuff, it still felt new to me as a 15-year-old. In terms of how, like you said, like, it just starts going and bad things start happening immediately. And this was the same year The Strangers came out, I think. So I had also seen The Strangers, and that was similar in terms of, like, once again, like, all gas, no brakes, like, 5 minutes in. And so I was, like, really finding how much I loved these kinds of, like, lean, mean movies that were, like, just fucking get into it. And this movie absolutely fucked me up, especially when the little girl starts like eating the mom. Like, that really got to me. So it was like, because in the trailer they have the guy, I think, fall. And the trailer was what really excited me about it, because I was like, ooh, and I was really into zombies, so I was like super excited. And I think Dexter was on. Was Dexter on at this point, the show?
I believe so.
Anyone remember?
2008, I think it was. Maybe just starting.
It started in 2006, yeah.
Okay, because I love Dexter, and I love Jennifer Carpenter.
Yeah.
And I was watching watching Dexter too young, yes, but whatever. And I was really excited to see her in it, and I should have known I was queer for that as well when I was younger. But again, hindsight is 20/20. But this movie, like, I was panicked. This whole movie had me panicking, sweating, and then the ending, just like, I was appalled. Never see, like, Doug Jones is an old woman, like, with the boobies. I was like, what? Like, never had, like, conceptualized that as a monster, and it just, like, absolutely blew my little brain. And my dad, of course, is like, my dad's an idiot, and was just like, oh, old woman titties. And I'm like, that was really scary. That was really fucking scary. And I don't remember, like, having, like, having any big effects after, but I remember loving it and wanting to watch it over. Like, this was like a comfort movie for me for a while. Like, I would put this on when it came out on DVD, like, all the time. I loved it so much. So yes, I have a soft spot in my heart for this movie. As much as I love Wreck, like, this was my introduction to like that whole thing, and it like
good.
I imprinted on it a bit as a teenager.
Good. I have a question because when Scott looks up into the attic, so they're in like the top floor apartment, whatever, and they see all this stuff, which is pretty interesting, and Wreck probably has the same shit going on with the cult defector trying to make a Armageddon virus, whatever it is.
It's different.
It's different.
Okay, fuck yeah, because I like the concept of that. I like the rabies concept and like all the shit that he's doing, and I would love a spinoff. Anyways, when Scott puts his camera up, does he see is it a baby? Is it a weird baby thing? Because in my mind, I always thought that like he saw Doug Jones's like weird creepy person character, and like that person came down from the attic because it's
not.
No, okay, it's like a second thing. That part is always weird to me.
And they don't explain it. Well, okay, so what I really like about both of these movies is that they don't really explain a whole lot. They give you some context clues. There's a little bit of environmental storytelling going on, but they don't really answer anything. And apparently the tape that they play that you can't quite understand was originally supposed to give more exposition. And they're like, they realized that it spoils a little too much. Like, it was going to lay out all the stuff that was happening, basically be like the villain twirling his mustache at the end and explaining his dastardly plan.
Gotcha.
And they decided not to do that, which I'm really glad, because that is one of the strong things.
Yeah.
So one of the strong things I think about both Wreck and this one, but I will say that the kid in the ceiling is still kind of a conundrum in Wreck. It's explained more in Wreck 2, as Wreck 2 sort of dives into more of the mythology of what's going on. There's more of that into it, but yes, that kid coming out of nowhere, it's like, who was that kid?
Yeah, I was always really confused about it. I'm glad that you gave that bit of context, because when we were watching it recently, I was like, okay, obviously they're playing the track at the wrong speed, so like I wonder what it sounds like sped up. I'm sure that that's somewhere on the internet, so I'd be really curious to see what it is. But yeah, I'm geeked about the thought. Like, I like that little background of a cult defector, and they were stealing like weaponized viruses and this sort of stuff, and it turned into a rabies zombie apocalypse sort of thing. Also, Mary Beth, to your point, Joey King is so good. I love Joey King as a little girl in this. 10 out of 10. My favorite actor in the movie.
Yes. I didn't even register it was her until I looked it up today. I was like, oh, fuck, that was Joey King. What the hell?
And then that moment she bites her mom, and the mom is screaming, "Run away, honey." Like, it's totally fine. You just bit me, but like, get safe. They're going to kill you. I love that manic energy from a maternal figure.
Wild.
Yeah.
It really is. So, Sean, how old were you? When did you see this movie? I'm curious.
So I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure that it was a bit after when Steve saw it. I was probably like, I saw it later than everybody else. I didn't see it right when it came out. I'm going to guess 17, but it was by our same friend.
Okay.
Coulter Brandon is a really big fan of this movie and likes to show it off. But I just saw it, like at his house. But yeah, something like that. And it definitely, I mean, I didn't cry, but it impacted me. It's
so
incredibly
what scene
stressful.
did you cry at, Steve? I'm curious.
I do. Listen, I'm a crier during movies. I will cry. Oh, don't worry. But Brandon's already talked about it on our show. Thank fucking God. I will cry during movies. I cry pretty frequently during movies. Not horror films, unless there's like a very. I can't remember like ever crying during a horror film. But I will admit I cry during films. But I can't. I would stand here and take it on the chin if I cried during quarantine, and maybe I repressed the memory, but I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sean, but I couldn't let that stand.
It's one of our favorite things to just poke at whenever this movie comes on. Obviously, like, ain't nothing wrong with crying. I've definitely cried at a horror movie, so totally get it. But yeah. I'm sorry, where were we?
So
I was asking about like how you saw Quarantine, and then also follow up. When did you see Rec?
Me? So I saw Rec.
Yeah,
after.
have you seen Rec?
I definitely saw Rec after Quarantine. It actually wasn't that long ago. It was probably within the past like 5 or 6 years, which I guess is a decent amount of time, but like in comparison. And loved it, but I've only seen it like twice, I think. So I wanted I need to re-up on it again for sure. I don't remember the difference in the ending, is what I'll say.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's just the ending of Rec is more religious in terms of like ideas of possession and weird like Catholic type of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas this is more like just a defector, and they're using a virus to like.
Yeah,
I don't really know what they plan to do with the virus. Unleash like Armageddon virus, I guess, and turn everyone into rabies monsters. So it is different because like it's more about the Vatican finding this girl that was possessed and then doing experiments on it, and then that's sort of what snowballed everything.
Okay, viral demons, got it.
I want to watch Rec because I love religious horror, so I feel like that's like a good up my alley.
Can I say then, I remember I loved Rec. I don't really think I have like an incredibly strong opinion about which one I liked more. Obviously, nothing but respect to the original. Always, Quarantine would not exist without Rec and what those filmmakers and creatives did. For me personally, I love the rabies, like the viral narrative for this story specifically. And I love not getting that exposition. I think just like you, Mary Beth, you brought up The Strangers earlier, and movies that don't explain why things are like I don't want a backstory. I don't want a why all the time. I think a lot of the times a movie will be great until the last half hour when you ruin it by making sure I get a really close look at what's behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. Let's turn all the lights on. And so
cough,
I think
the last exorcism cough.
Dude. And there's more. That's a whole other. But I will say I think for me, Quarantine will probably hit more in that aspect because like I don't know, religious horror, unless it's really culty, like at least like Catholic horror demon stuff is going to not hit me as hard as like the concept of rabies eventually mutating somehow or something for me.
Because Sean will be like, that shit's going to happen. Like that shit can happen.
100%. Yeah. 100%. And we're not going to handle it
this
well.
This isn't horror. This is a pre-documentary.
So, I saw this in the theaters. I had seen Rec beforehand, and Rec had made me excited to bring my friends to go see this movie. And I had told on our episode with Rec with Rob Savage, I talked a little bit about my story of I got like a disc that I found on eBay for these because there were a lot of movies that were coming out at that time overseas that I really wanted to watch, and who knew if they were ever going to come here. And so I had bought Rec. I'd gotten this really shitty copy of a DVD that was darker than it is, and it's a dark movie. And I remember sitting there and having the absolute shit scared out of me. So I was really excited to bring my friends to go see this because a lot of my friends weren't into the subtitles or not the artsy kind of thing that I was into. And I was like, this is a big Hollywood produced movie with recognizable people that you might want to go see. And I was like, maybe we'll go watch this. And I remember thinking, so I think this might actually only be the second time I've seen this movie, maybe third. I might have watched it on DVD when it came out. I can't remember. But I do remember thinking I really like some of the stuff that it's doing. But like everything that it's doing, I felt that Rec was doing better for the most part, was my problem. But I will say there are two things in this that there's a couple things in this I do think this does better than Rec. I really like the kind of in-camera use of using it as a bludgeoning weapon that Scott does at one point.
Yes.
Yes.
Like that was a big fuck yeah moment in this movie that is full of like everything is going wrong. Everything is falling apart. No one is getting a win. And so seeing that moment of like them fighting back and just using the camera, whatever they have to push back, I love that moment. And I think that that's something this movie still, when I was rewatching it today, was like, yeah, this works really well for me. I love that moment.
There's a political commentary in it somewhere. There's some sort of social something about filmmakers using our art to beat out whatever. Sorry. I'm thinking of Diary of the Dead a lot.
I actually have thoughts about why they changed the ending to what they did too about that because of the content, post 9/11 context of everything. And I feel like there was such a resurgence of people like wanting to believe in God again and like wanting to put like their faith into something. And I mean, again, this also might just be people think are too stupid to understand like the religious ending. And it also is from Spain, and Spain is a very religious country, but there's also something interesting about changing it to like a doomsday cult in the post 9/11 context. And like the way that we kind of shaped the narrative, and also about how the media is represented and like felt about in like the US at that time too is also very interesting in tying that all in together.
Yeah.
So I find that just like a very fascinating like thinking about why they changed the ending.
Totally fair.
And why make that change. And again, like it could just be because they're like, audiences might not get it. We're not like as religious of a country. But at the same time, it feels interesting, like just taking that and putting it here.
I have two quick things. One, I love the way that the police officer's relationship with the filmmakers change throughout the course of the film, because he's very like abrasive with them. And then the CDC guy is like, get the camera, like up in the beginning of the third act, it's like, get the camera out of here. The cops like, they have every right to be here. So it's just a very funny, the writing is goofy there.
Oh, yes.
I do think it's funny because, like, this movie is definitely, like, ACAB through, like, a good portion of this movie. And then by the end of it, he's almost come around, and I think he realizes how fucked they are. And that this is going to be sort of, like, the document of their existence, that this is actually happening. And so it is interesting to see his journey. Like, he's a very side character, and so we don't really get to see it fleshed out. But just these points of him constantly pushing the camera back, saying, turn it off, and if I tell you, you run, if I do this, you do this. And then by the end of it, being completely out of his depth and just being like, no, we do got to film all this because I don't think we're going to make it.
And dead. And essentially dead at the end. The other thing I was curious about is, so again, going back to context, this film obviously has people in it that you're like, you know Jennifer Carpenter as soon as the movie starts, and like, you know Jay Hernandez. And you can
I know Jay Hernandez.
Yeah, and you can see like, you know, like I know Joey King. I knew the dick lawyer who gets killed by the dog. He's in like the American Horror Story. Some of the seasons, I can't remember what his name is off the top. But like, do you think that watching a horror film where you don't recognize anyone adds to it? Like, I think that's one thing that Sean and I spoke about with Speak No Evil, is like, if I see an American version of Speak No Evil, the actors are going to pull me out of it. I think like I'm going to recognize these people and see them as these actors, as opposed to like, you know, using Cloverfield and Paranormal Activity as examples. Cloverfield, I didn't know anyone in it. Like TJ Miller was his first movie. He's probably the most notable name out of all the people in my opinion. Or I guess Lizzie Kaplan now is probably the biggest one, but both of them were very young and I didn't know them at, 14 years old watching that film. And then Paranormal Activity is like nobody's literally. So do you think that kind of changes your view, or changed your view, watching Jennifer Carpenter be scared as opposed to watching a Spanish woman who you didn't know being scared?
I do, because I do think that like one of the things that found footage has historically done is used a lot of unknown people to like heighten that kind of realness that this is a real thing. Whereas here, this is a Hollywood production. I mean, you have Jennifer Carpenter, you have, Jay Hernandez, you have Doug Jones doing the creature. We have these people that are known, or I mean, in the case of Doug Jones, people probably didn't know him, but they would know of his work if they had seen his filmography. So we have like this situation where it does have a little bit more of a Hollywood sheen to it in some degree, that I do think is what kind of heightened the idea of that one, because like the plot points of what happens are very similar. There's the girl, there's the dog, there's the little kid biting the mom, there's the woman in the beginning, there's the finale. Like all of these are hitting very similar beats. But I think when I was watching Rec, I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to make it. And what's interesting is that like there's no one does make it in this too. Like, it's not as if like Jennifer Carpenter is going to, survive at the end of this, but it does sort of lessen it a bit. I guess it takes me out of it a little bit because these are actors as opposed to people in some regard.
Yeah.
For me.
Jennifer Carpenter is going to get to the end. That Jay Hernandez is probably going to at least take a long time before he dies, and it's going to be a bummer when he does. Like, you're more attached to these characters in terms of their like archetypal life structure in a horror film than you are someone that you don't already know. I don't know if those words have ever been used in the sentence before, but I feel proud that I just did that. Just throwing that out there.
There you go. So, okay, you brought up earlier Jennifer Carpenter, and I have very changing thoughts on her performance in this. When I saw this in the movie theater, I was very annoyed by her reaction. Mm-hmm. Because, and I think now, I feel like this movie does her dirty. Whereas before I was like, Jennifer Carpenter, what happened here? Now I do feel that this movie is a little misogynistic towards that character in a way. Because the way that I think Rec is over the top too. Like everyone is shouting in Rec, but it feels louder and adds to the kind of cacophony of it, so that by the time Angela is at the very end just sobbing and is broken, everyone around her is. Here, there are moments where it peaks, but I do feel that like she is the only one that is really breaking down. We have some quiet moments of breaking down, but no one is at her level. And so it feels as if if we're looking at her in a vacuum, it feels real. If I were in that situation, I'd be fucking hyperventilating. I'd be worried that I was a bit like everything she's doing, I would feel 110%. But I don't feel that anyone around her is living up to that level. So it just, for me, it stands out as sort of like, here we go, the only woman in this, the hysterical woman, while her cameraman is having to, it's okay, baby. Like, he uses patronizing terms at this point, whereas before he was a very professional. He's like, it's okay, baby. We can do this, baby. We got this, baby. And everyone else is basically calming her down because she is the hysterical woman, and listeners are using that in quotations. And so I do feel that this movie does her bad. I don't think necessarily it's the acting. I think it's the way that this movie is a little bit embracing a lot of tropes that Hollywood movies have.
Totally.
Well, and it's like very much having like the firefighters and the EMTs are our heroes and they must be masculine and save the day. Once again, post 9/11 America, we must remember that they are our saviors, everybody. Like, they are superheroes and they don't have emotions. They can only do the thing. Even though we talked about like the cop obviously showing the fact that he's terrified, I still think there's a measuredness to that. Like, all of the men are having a very measured reaction when, like, Jennifer Carpenter's the only one being like, hey, this is all shit. And in Rec, everyone is like, this is all shit. There isn't that, like, inhibition of, like, gendered reactions. It's more just, like, everything is chaos. But here, it really... And again, the marketing for both Recs played on a woman screaming on the front. But, like, Jennifer Carpenter's in, like, a white tank top. You kind of see her cleavage. She's screaming on the poster. It's, like, the image of the movie. So there is, like...
It's in night vision, so it looks, like, salacious a bit. Like, there is... The way it's... The male gaze in that poster is something.
Well,
Very
it's
fair.
so interesting because... So John Eric Dodell directed this, and he also directed As Above, So Below. He also directed the Poughkeepsie tapes. He's a big found footage guy, and I generally really like what he does with found footage. As Above, So Below and the Poughkeepsie tapes are, like, two of my favorite found footage movies. This one is just, like, so much more commercial. I think it was trying to be more commercial, and it has much more of that sheen and polish to it. That it just, like, is so... Because I don't necessarily think, like, there are some weird things, like, in As Above, So Below with her as a woman, but it's a little bit pushing back against that. The Poughkeepsie tapes is a whole other conversation that we do not have time for. Have either of you seen the Poughkeepsie tapes?
No.
I haven't.
It's on my list, but no.
Yes, but again, that's one. It's been so long, and it was only like once that I don't have a ton of commentary on it. Yeah.
And Terry, have you seen it? Okay.
No.
Cool. So, but, like, that's a whole other weird can of worms about women that is a whole other podcast worth of stuff. So it's just very interesting to see, like, how this differs from the rest of his, like, filmography and what else he has done, at least in the found footage space. It's very fascinating. And how, like, I think he's a good person to choose to do it because of his experience, but at the same time, it's like, oof, I don't know how much of a say he had, or if he really just maybe is kind of a douchebag. I hope not.
Yeah.
But
I also so another question, because it's rare that we get to talk with other horror buffs and people that host podcasts, but what happens to your feelings of a film? I guess we could talk about this when we do, like, ratings of the film, but what happens to your feelings of a film when you watched it when you were younger and really enjoyed it or experienced it a certain way, but then look at it from this point of view, because like, I mean, full transparency, us talking about like the male gaziness and the post 9/11 aspects of quarantine, like I've never thought about them before, and I'm not gonna like, it doesn't detract from like my 14-year-old experience of it, but it does make me look at the film another way, and like I won't be able to watch it without those thoughts, which is completely fine, and that's what like film discourse and discussion is. But I'm curious how you guys approach that. Like, do you still maintain like, oh, I really enjoyed this film because I did when I was younger, or do you adapt how you're feeling now? Which there's no easy answer, I feel like, but I'm curious.
It depends on the movie. So like we talked about 30 Days of Night, and that was another movie that like I imprinted on as a teenager, and now I watch it and I'm like, very much it's like, again, the post 9/11 like white savior narrative, and like there are issues with it, but I still really like it and don't let that taint how I've enjoyed it, because when I was younger I didn't have any concept of those things, and even now I still like it for what it is while also acknowledging it. So like with this, I can still really like it. I mean, I like Quarantine, like full stop here. I love Rec, but I like Quarantine. Whatever. This is a safe space. But like even with the like the male gazy stuff, I don't think it necessarily affects my rating of it. I don't really rate things a lot of the time because like the ratings are so weird in my head, but like I still appreciate it for what it is, but take everything else like with the kind of an like with the context of that. And sometimes it might change how I feel about a film entirely. Again, it's really film by film situation. It's hard like to kind of tell.
I mean, I think that there's a difference between being kind of a film lover and then also kind of being a critic and kind of digging into what about it works, what about it doesn't work. Because I remember, for instance, Monster Squad, huge movie when I was a kid, was a favorite, watched it over and over and over again, hadn't watched it in years, had sat down to watch it before we watched it for Little Cuts, had sat down to watch it like, I don't know, back in 2018, and within like the first 10 minutes of the movie, a kid is using a slur for gay people in the movie, and it took me back, and I was like, excuse me, and then it just kept. Sean as the Monster Squad.
Hell yeah,
that is so fucking cool.
I just got it, so I had to. Cool. Sorry, didn't mean to derail you.
No, that's really cool. I'm glad you brought that up, because like, so that movie has a special place in my heart still, and I still think it's a good movie. But there are things in it that I'm just like, holy shit, that is not good. And I think about this in terms of like a movie like Dracula Dead and Loving It. That movie comes up in the podcast once in a while. I was surprised we actually did an episode on it. That is a movie that imprinted on me as a teenager, and I can quote that movie frontwards to backwards. And so when I'm looking at it now, I can recognize that it is pretty cheesy, but also there's a nostalgia factor. And I think that any film that we talk about on this show, there's always going to be that nostalgia factor that is going to be there, and I think that's special, and I think that's what makes film so cool.
Yeah, hell yeah. Sorry for asking you a question on your guys' podcast, but
no, I wanted to know. Please do. It's a conversation. We're here for it.
Yeah, I still like this movie. Like, I understand that. I know I love Rec, and I do think Rec is like a better movie, but I still really love Quarantine. I think a lot of it has to do with how much I did as a kid. But I mean, like, and I know that it is essentially, like, it really is, like, Rec almost shot for shot with a different ending and, like, American actors and maybe not, like, a full understanding. This is the problem with American remakes a lot of the time is, like, not a full understanding of what makes something scary, just, like, a very base level understanding.
Yeah.
Without, like, understanding how to translate what that fear looks like. And I think that happens in a lot of, like, Japanese remakes of, like, okay, this is scary, but you don't get, like, the full-on, like, deeper cultural understanding of why that is scary in Japan, and it doesn't translate over here, and they don't, like, try to translate that over here, which is why The Ring was so good. Anyway, I digress. I think because of that ending change, and because of, like, it being a remake and them wanting to, I think, primarily get money from it, it does not have the exact same DNA, but it still, I think, is very scary. I think it got to me a lot when I was younger, and I think they did capture a lot of the horror pretty well.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
So things that I do think this movie does as well, if not better, than Rec is I love the opening. I love the opening of this with Angela kind of doing the takes. That is that moment when she gets interrupted, that is a complete shot for shot. Like, some of it's a shot for shot remake of Rick, but when she is going through and they go in the locker room, for instance, and there's like the sort of, it's a little like, it is definitely sexist and definitely like there's that kind of feel to it, but it still makes me kind of laugh when they go in, they like rush into the locker room and the guy's in the shower and he keeps trying to like, you know, show his genitals
largest
and everything.
Largest hose in the firehouse.
Right. It's just, it's funny, and it kind of speaks to this camaraderie that these people have. And I feel like these are, I do feel this opening does establish these as real people that have lives and have friendships and have this sort of weight going into what we're experiencing. I think that is really good. I love that. I love the tension in it. I do like that it is a lower decibel than Wreck, because my big complaint about Wreck is that everyone is shouting all the time. Mm-hmm. And understandable. You're into the situation. You don't know what's happening. It is definitely conveying that kind of chaos. Whereas here, it's a little bit more measured. I do think the buildup in Wreck is a little bit better than here. I do think that this one kind of maintains the same kind of status quo through most of the movie. It's intense, but it still is keeping that. But my biggest complaint, and it's not that, like, listen, I love Doug Jones. I think he is great doing kind of creature stuff. I just don't think he can compare to Javier Botet, who did the original in Wreck.
Javier Botet.
Because he is such a long, spindly, very thin person that can get his body into different directions. He's really good at doing kind of the kind of weird, don't look human kind of creature effects.
Okay.
And I do think that his woman at the end of that movie is much better than in Quarantine.
Would I know Javier Bartet from anything else?
Let me see.
He was in Mama. He was in Crimson Peak. He was the ghost in Crimson Peak. He was the Crooked Man in The Conjuring 2.
He's basically the Spanish Doug Jones. He's the Spanish Doug Jones,
I was gonna say,
basically.
yeah. Yeah.
He was the hobo in It. He was the Slender Man in Slender Man.
Right,
the Tilda's corpse in Scary Stories.
He's gonna be the vampire in the
Dark.
last voyage of Demeter.
No shit.
Oh, I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Amazing.
cannot wait.
All right. Okay, cool. So yeah, basically like the Spanish Doug Jones.
He is. He's very tall. He has Marfan syndrome, so he has hyperlaxicity of certain body tissue. So he can he has very long, very fine thinners. He's a tall, very thin build. He's 6'7" and weighs 123 pounds. He's very So Doug Jones is fantastic. It's just this guy was born for these roles, and it's I think I find it more terrifying in Wreck than Quarantine. Otherwise, I do like the way that this ending unfolds, because it's very similar.
Yeah. I gotta watch Wreck now. I need to watch Wreck as soon as
gotta
possible
watch
in the theater.
You gotta. On that note, do we want to wrap up and give this our rating out of 5?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm looking to make sure that there's nothing else I wanted to really highlight. I'm good, I think.
Cool. All right. Well, Terry, how many rabid little children out of 5 do you give Quarantine?
This one it's just so hard, because I don't I hated this movie after I left the theater when did this come out? 2008.
Yeah.
So I would have been 27. 27? Yeah. So I hated this movie leaving the movie theater, because I had just seen Wreck. That movie scared the absolute shit out of me. And it just felt like I was seeing similar beats, which makes sense, but it just wasn't playing very well. I have a little bit more of an appreciation for it with this watch, in terms of the things that I think it does right and the things that maybe it does better than Wreck. But there are a lot of horror moments that I do find Wreck hits a little harder. And I think that might just be because of whichever one you see first, right? Because there are very similar moments. And so there's that kind of feel to it, where I do think when I saw Wreck, like you were talking about with Quarantine, there were things in here that I don't think I'd ever seen in cinema before. It was using familiar tactics, but doing them in ways that I had never seen in film up until that point. And so it just constantly was throwing curveballs at me. And so I can get the feeling, particularly if you had no knowledge of Wreck and you had sat down to see Quarantine, you're getting similar movie and you're getting similar what the fuckery. And so I can understand a little bit more now than I could have when I was a very angry 27-year-old leaving the movie theater. So I don't know. I think that there's things that this does well. I'm going to say 3. I'm going to just say 3 because I don't think it's a bad movie. It just isn't. It's not Wreck for me. But that's just me. But what about you, Mary Beth?
I'm going to give it 4 rabid little children. Again, I think, like you said, Terry, I saw this first. I really liked it. I think it's so similar to Wreck that it's like, when I watched Wreck, I said, oh, people are being kind of unfair to quarantine. I thought they were very similar. And I obviously know that I can see the differences now and everything, but Wreck is a 5-star movie. Quarantine's a 4-star movie. I mean, like, I feel like we just lose a star in terms of some of the translating it stuff, but it still scared the shit out of me. I think there are some really good scares in it. I love Jennifer Carpenter in this movie. I think it does a good job taking something and putting it into an American context and still getting a lot of the scares and making it terrifying and basically understanding what's so terrifying about it. So it's a 4 for me. So Steve and Sean.
I'm sorry. What you just told me reminded me of one thing that I wanted to bring up. One of the things that I think this movie kind of fails to do in terms of the original is so that I was appreciative this has a very diverse cast, particularly as of the inhabitants of the apartment. But one thing that the Wreck does incredibly well that I feel like is a missed opportunity with this one, particularly as we're talking about post 9/11 fears, is the xenophobia, because there's a lot of xenophobia in Wreck.
Yeah, there is.
And so there was like a lot of conversations where people like, oh, it's those people and the weird shit that they're making in their apartment. Like there's a lot of inner fear that I think Wreck did really well that I'm surprised this movie didn't tap into because of, as you said, Mary Beth, it is a post 9/11 movie.
Yeah.
Dealing
with
skim over the xenophobia that was happening. Yeah. It doesn't really dig into it a whole lot, even though it has a very diverse cast, which I was appreciative of. Sorry. That was the one thing that poked in my head.
I do appreciate that they didn't try to make it though. I feel like so many horror, like this is just me like having thought too much about post 9/11 horror and how so much post 9/11 horror is about xenophobia and being like, who's the scary person? It is a little bit of a relief to see them like maybe opt to skip over that trope a little bit. Yeah. But maybe that's just, I don't know. Maybe that's just me being like, oh, for once we don't have racist people in the apartment building pointing their fingers at the Brown family as like being the bad guys. Yeah. Like, thankfully we don't have that this time.
Yeah.
But anyway, throwing to Steve and Sean, how many rabid little children out of 5 do you give Quarantine?
Sean, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think I'm going to give it, all things considered, we're considering the fact that it's a remake and it had, the power of Wreck to stand on to even exist in the first place, to the social issues that we've discussed, to some of the more positive things, like Steve said, we rewatched it recently in the daylight with roommates, and they were reacting very strongly to what was happening. I think overall, I'm going to do, I would have given it like a 4.5, but I'm bumping it down for the bad thing. So I'm going to say 3.5 is 3.5 rabid little children. So imagine 3 rabid children and one of them, and like a half of one.
Dragging
it's just dragging along. Yeah. So that's my rating.
Hell yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's
right.
great.
What about you, Steve?
So this is really funny because I'm the one who brought this film that scared me when I was younger, but I, unfortunately wasn't rating films when I was younger. I think if I would have rated this when I was younger, I would have given it a very high score. Now with all of the horror films that I've watched and specifically the found footage that I love, I enjoy it for what it is. But I do think I would give it 3 sweet little Joey Kings or 3 rabid little children out of 5. I think it's like I try to go by 10 in my head. It's like a 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5. It's better than average, but there's a lot that I think in 2023 you can get from like a similar level horror film. So that's kind of how I judge it, as like there's a lot better movies with the same budget and like similar directors and acting or casts I could get somewhere else than what Quarantine can give me. So while I still think I would love to see it in a theater again with all the lights off, I don't know if we mentioned this, but like during quarantine in Michigan, Sean and myself and our roommate, we bought a projector screen and a projector, like a 16-foot screen, and we would just watch films in our living room every night. We picked one film every single night that we wanted to watch. Either, our first time watching something, we would switch it up, like Miyazaki one night and this movie another night. And so we watched Quarantine one night, and I will say Quarantine still affected me in the dark. So, I think it's still above average in terms of horror films, but I have to give it 3 rabid little children out of 5.
Gotcha.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us for part 1 of our sort of like 2-parter episode. Where can your listeners find you? The floor is yours.
Do you want me to go, Sean? I know.
Yeah, that's all you. Yeah, you're the guy.
So again, we are Mostly Horror. We are a part of the Morbid Podcast Network. So if you want to find us, we are on all of the streaming services, or you can listen to our episodes early and ad free on Wondery Plus and Amazon Music. We are on Twitter and TikTok at Mostly Horror, and also Instagram at Mostly Horror Pod. Talk to us on there. Tell us about things that you liked in our episodes. Tell us how much quarantine sucks. And then if you want to follow me, I'm on all the socials at Steven is Average, and Shauna's on all of the things at Hypocrite Inc. or hypocrite.inc. And that's where we are.
Woo, what he said.
So the next episode, we're going to make you do that, Sean, and you're going to be the
Sean.
That's fine. I was already thinking about it. I was like, I'll do it on mine. I never do it on our actual show, but I'll do it on my episode for you guys.
So listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. What do you think of quarantine, and how much do you love it? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we are on Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.